time out of your day. This is going to be so worth it. Just a tiny bit of background on tonight's guest lecturer. OK Sammy is a music production phenomenon that emerged from the KennyBeats beat battle scene. After, dominating the competition and becoming a staple finalist in the series, he's released lots of amazing singles and his first EP in 2020. He has new music coming, so definitely go and check out his discography. His new single Paradise drops tomorrow. So, with all that being said, it is my total honor to introduce OK Sammy.
Hi, Arya. It's so good to be here. Thank you guys for setting this up. I've never had an intro actually like that, so thank you also for writing that up. I feel very flattered to hear that.
Yeah, man, no problem. So, I want to jump into it just because, I think we're all excited. So, how did you get your start?
Um, I mean, I grew up playing kind of in a lot of classical music with piano and cello back when I was like maybe 5 years old. I have like pictures of me really young. My dad plays cello professionally and taught piano, so kind of worked with him for a little while, then moved on and got kind of separate teacher, and from there on, it was not really at the forefront of my interest as a kid. Definitely didn't really like playing. But as I started to get more into the creative side, just playing with my friends, and because people were doing like high school bands and stuff, it started becoming a little more interesting to me. So, sort of near the tail end of high school, I stopped formally taking lessons, but was still kind of screwing around playing piano. Had a little bit of a stint where I was doing like practicing cover songs and learning guitar. But it really took a backseat, I think, late high school to maybe the middle of college. And from there on, it was like I knew I always enjoyed writing and performing to a little extent, but I remember making the deliberate decision not to attend a music school because I didn't. Like the lack of stability in the work was terrifying. So I went to UC Berkeley, not Berkeley Music School, which confuses a lot of people. I went to UC Berkeley to study computer science, which is what I do today, and it was sort of, yeah, it kind of like, I guess it felt like I was always going to find my way back, because it was when I was interning at Facebook in 2015. I had a bit of a, I don't know, like a flash forward. Time just flew by so fast. And I had my first taste of industry work. So seeing how quickly things went by, I thought to myself, if I don't really pay attention to what I'm doing with my life, I'm going to turn 30, 40, 50, and I don't want to look back and feel like I could have done something more. So kind of on a whim, I started producing again. Um, oh, sorry, I say again because I tried actually a few times in late high school. I think Gorillaz had come out with Plastic Beach. That was a huge thing, and I was like really trying to get in production, and I sucked, and I gave up actually about 2 or 3 times in FL Studio. I would maybe spend like 2 weeks to 3 weeks trying to diligently learn all the things, and then kind of seeing the gap between what I was creating and what I heard and my tastes is super discouraging, which I'm sure is true for anyone starting out. And it wasn't until I guess mid college where I sort of picked up music production and kind of became obsessive over it. I was spending 8 to 9 hours a day, uh, and I guess it feels. I usually say this without really thinking. Not that I recommend this, but I basically didn't attend class in favor of producing, and so I mean the system was, if the system's gonna weight my grade on 2 midterms and a final, then technically all you have to do is cram, But
Right.
this is not educational advice. It was definitely like um, kind of a deliberate decision on my end, and I made it out okay. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, I kind of pulled through after that. Still like loving music even more than I did before, but not willing to commit, to the career path. So out of there, it was like I was just working at Facebook for a few years. Right now, I run a startup with some of my friends, coding as from like I guess my 9 to 5. But really, my day is just very very flexible. I'm jumping between work and music depending on how burnt out I feel, and it's kind of a really nice self fulfilling cycle or self sustaining cycle because one thing
Right.
balances out the other. And yeah, so here I am.
That's great. I mean, that's so awesome that you can kind of, explore like both hemispheres of your brain in that way, you know.
Yes,
So this is
definitely.
kind of just building on that a little bit on the earlier question. When I say okay, Sammy, the first thing that I think of is like the Kenny beat scene, like the beat battle area. So how did that come about? Like, how did you get into, doing beat battles and resampling like that?
Yeah, this is gonna be a shout out to one of my friends, Juan Rios or Grizz Rivers, who actually won an earlier Kenny Beats battle. I don't know if he's watching right now, but um, he basically, on the day that he was kind of in finals contention, I was kind of watching him, and it just seemed almost like I will just shamelessly admit I think it was partially motivated out of like inspiration to see him like going out of his way to uh, take on these opportunities that I guess weren't really that big at the time because he was maybe like in the ninth battle and Kenny's like on to I don't know like 40 now. But also out of like jealousy, right? And that was actually a very, very transformative period, I think, because uh, all up to that point, and even now, I do believe I don't, there's no really room for ego in writing and music and this sort of creative world. I mean, you should have self confidence, but it's a different, there's a balance. And the first time I felt like this desperate, almost desperate need for validation. And so I started participating, kind of really just looking for Kenny to say that my stuff was good. And I promise you, that is like a miserable, miserable goal to have. I was actually, I think I tried maybe 2 or 3 times. And, I was making progress, but I was like, thinking in my head like wow like it's so frustrating to not get picked or to make it to the finals and not win. And then I was also like this sounds like so entitled from my perspective, like when did I start caring about this stuff? And so I kind of had to pull back because music production was actually becoming very stressful and very unfun. I was kind of like results oriented way possible, and I literally just had a day where I was like, all right, let's take their feedback, let's be open-minded about the things they've said, and at the same time let's also not try to put so much emphasis on winning. Let's try and just experiment with different genres. Like I think that there's one weekend where I just started putting my own sample challenges together on my own. I started doing like just clicking a random sample and putting it in and trying to write around it. And I actually was having a lot of fun. And that was a feeling I had not had for a very long time. And literally after that day, I was like, wow, this feeling was, I haven't had this in so long. I've enjoyed this so much that it's like actually overwhelming my need to be validated. Like I could just thrive, continue to produce off of this feeling alone, and that's a wonderful thing because it's completely in my control, and it's not dependent on external factors. So yeah, after that, I don't know. It sounds too much like a fairy tale story, but I promise you, genuinely, I won the 13th battle, I think. After that, I was literally just going in saying, at the end of the day, I don't need to submit this. I'm just going to try to take this opportunity to make something that I think is cool.
Right.
And it was sort of just like a massive snowball from there. I feel like that really was the catalyst. I mean, less so a technical and production skill set improvement, but more of a mental switch. And
Right.
like that sort of still guided me.
I mean, that's amazing. So I know we actually have some people here from the Kenny Beats scene. So if you guys are listening, if you're wanting to win the Kenny Beats battle, maybe try like not winning. So that's what you should take away from that. Anyway,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, could you tell me about some people that you think influenced your sound?
Yes. There are a lot. It's really the flavor of the month, to be honest. I don't think I have like these core influences. Actually, uh, maybe a couple. I think people often compare me to this Japanese lo-fi dude named Nujabes, and as and I listened to like a lot of his work in this show called Samurai Champloo, which I highly recommend you watch. And it was sort of like coming from that. That was like the sample background, and then from him, I like also listened to Dilla, and then I got my electronic gateway through Daft Punk, which I think is the case for a lot of people. Really got obsessed with that French like house song with Justice, Sebastian, Joseph and kind of really loving that like disco sampled feel, and so things started to correlate a little bit. From there on, there's like a Maddion and Porter Robinson phase, and like when I say phase, these influences are just at the forefront. So I'm literally making stuff as close to them as possible. And I still think about their songs and ideas from their songs and try to work them in. So I don't think my phases ever like go away completely. They just get diluted, which helps you make more interesting stuff because you're drawing from small things from really random places. And then moving forward, like right now, I think I'm listening to a lot more like acoustic stuff, especially work from like the Free Nationals, Anderson Paak. But you know, there's you hear the roots of a lot of their work in like sampling and even some like electronic music ideas in their work. And so I don't know the process I go through when I'm writing a new song actually is really just listening to my library, finding a song that I like and saying, I actually don't really know how to make this. And immediately feeling like I need to make it to kind of prove to myself that I can. And also, like I said, it's important to, I think, stay in that sandbox mode, like a kid playing in the sandbox. You want to be exploring all the time. I don't want to, keep on using the same thing and honing in on, the same formulas all the time. You'll always have those subconsciously, which helps you develop your sound. But, I've personally found it useful to deliberately get out of my comfort zone as much as I can. And yeah, I'd say that's sort of
I think
my
that's great
take
advice.
on influence.
Yeah, I mean that's really great stuff. I feel like that's something that a lot of people can really benefit from and speak to. Um, and this next question is something you've kind of touched on a little bit already, but I just want to know officially, like, who is OK Sammy outside of the music studio, like in your day to day, you know?
Um, that's such a wow, that's such a deep question. Um,
I mean, I know that you touched
I
on,
don't
how you
know.
did
That kind of
CS.
brings up entire like sorry.
No, I was just saying how
Sorry, I didn't mean to
you
interrupt you.
you've done CS and you've explored all these kind of like tech options. Is that something that you think is stemming from music production, or do you think that like your music production is
Okay.
stemming?
Yeah, so this is a good segue. Yeah, I think the question, like when I think about it, I kind of think about identity. Um, and there's something to be said about identity as a creative. And I don't mean to scorn anyone in tech or especially, but there's something about like being an Asian dude in the Silicon Valley and working at like some tech company. Like there's an associated set of stereotypes around it and kind of like, yeah, like a core identity to it. And personally, I didn't really feel proud of doing any of that. It never felt like, you know, I was excited to tell people that I worked on this feature or, I built something like that. But I was excited for them to kind of listen to a piece of music that I didn't even write, but I just really enjoyed and they enjoyed it too. And I'm like, I started kind of just chasing that a little bit more. And like it's weird outside of the the music studio, it almost feels like I've tied so much of my identity to music at this point. It's almost very hard to say. It's like not very binary. I would say because of the way I work and the way I think, I'm hopping between my work and my music sometimes just throughout the day and kind of blending it together. I'd never feel like, I've segmented a personality or a part of myself to be this person outside of music. I've just chosen to engage with music farther and farther as especially this year when as opportunities have come up more and more. I don't know if any of that makes sense.
No, that was great. I think that makes a lot of sense, and that's actually like a great transition into what I think a lot of people are waiting for. I don't want to take up too much time with this discussion, and we're gonna have plenty of time for questions at the end. So, to everyone watching, at this point, we're kind of gonna move into the breakdown section of this. And if you have any questions during the breakdown that you want to ask Eric, just raise your hand with the function in the reactions window, and we'll do our best to get your question in front of him as he's doing this live. So without any more of me kind of like talking, I'm just going to hand over the spotlight to you, and I'm excited to take it away, man.
Cool. All right. Let's hope this works. I think we should be fine. We tested this. Wait, you still on? Sorry, I need to move like all of my windows get screwed up whenever I do this, so can you hear this? Oh, sorry. That was crazy loud. I'm also on the wrong project because I switched over before. My bad.
Yeah, no problem.
I totally forgot. Did you get blasted by that like sound though?
I think it was a great introduction. You're kind of warming up our ears.
All right. Sorry, I was on my EP intro, but I meant to bring up I think the Kenny semifinals because I feel like hopefully we'll have enough time to get to this one too. But when I wrote this track, which was the intro to my EP, that was actually quite a while before I started winning. And I feel like that metamorphosis in thought and just production workflow and finding inspiration through other things has significantly changed the way I write and the way I produce. So some of the thought patterns in that earlier section, it feels like a prototype almost. And I still feel this way. I think my first EP was very much kind of a proof of concept, especially visually, of what I want to do better in the future. But definitely happy I put it out. Again, sorry for the delay.
No, I mean, no problem at all. Just so everyone who's listening can know, you can find all of his music on Spotify, including the EP that he's talking about. So definitely go check that out.
Yeah, so I guess I'll just start going because we can start talking about some high level things about this track. So this was my submission for the KennyBeats semifinals. So KennyBeats hosted kind of like a season finale now, which was really fun. Unfortunately, Alex Trebek had passed away that day, so kind of as an homage to him, we were given the sample, perfectly timed load, which is like this really bangled. He had this segment where he just sung auto-tuned versions of songs, and you had to guess what it was. That was the trivia. So, yeah, let me know if it's too loud or too quiet. I'll adjust as needed.
And the child takes the nurse. The child takes the nurse. I pull the carrier. The child takes the nurse. I come from Alabama with my banjo on my knee. I'm going to Louisiana. My true love for to see.
All right, so yeah, it's pretty rough. Like I don't know how you're supposed to flip something like this. Like in terms of like an old like MPC Kanye style flip. So there are some tricks of the trade, I guess. And the first thing that I did, this is a new technique that I saw. There's an online thing called Spleeter, which is an open source machine learning toolkit that actually has learned how to split up any sample into stems, even if you don't have the original components or any reference. It's like learned over time, which is mind-boggling, how to pull out frequencies that sound like drums and bass, and it actually does a pretty good job. So, for example, all right, as good of a job as you might imagine something working. Like it's still pretty mangled, but like this is usable now, right? Um, or the bass line. I don't know what other is. Oh, some random like garbage. But I really focused on the vocals, so we have a vocal stem here as well. So sorry, there's some like processing on it, but you can hear like it kind of pulled out that auto tune effect and really removed a lot of the instrumentals. So from there on, I basically did like the lowest hanging fruit, which was to turn the sample into a lead. So some of these might be Ableton specific. I'm sure there are like alternatives in whatever a DAW you're using. But essentially taking a tiny slice of the vocals here and processing them into a lead. And so this is kind of a really kind of a behemoth of a chain. I usually don't get this much into it. But this is a tiny slice of Alex Trebek's voice, kind of processed through some like phasers, some OTT, which is a multi-band compression that maybe some of you are aware of. If you're not aware of this, it's a free plugin. And it's actually like it's used egregiously and for good reason. It's really, really helpful in getting like this pressed sound. So you'll hear what in a second what his voice turned into. And so I actually made this lead before even coming up with an idea for the song. I was just like, let's just like make some, you know, tools for us to build off of. And going from there, I think this is a consistent thing. And the most fun about sample writing is finding an anchor point for your workflow to start. So how do you start from a blank slate? Well, one of the best ways with samples is that they sort of serve as a suggestion for different points that you could start from. And so literally there's one part of the track, there's like kind of this like string section. And I kind of cut it up and I was just screwing around with it until I got something like this. This was actually I remember the core motif of the entire track. And so this sounds terrible. I kind of pulled out the strings to play it into sampler in a cleaner way. So now you get like this clean string, like, I don't know, literally some short 5-note lick. And actually, I found it really, really useful to start from this because chord writing, especially as a piano player, is really, really so much easier once you have like a melody in mind. So once I had like these notes in mind, I sort of could start building chords. And I believe we started sort of with this intro section, this pre-chorus, for lack of a better term. And so you heard like that motif just fitting over these 3 chords, right? And then that sort of just, it's kind of just like a snowball of momentum from there on. And I sort of wrote the last little bit just independently, kind of just screwing around with chords as you do. And so this now, once you have this, like literally once you have this motif and you have these like piano chords, I feel like you've built yourself a very strong foundation. Usually the scariest part for me, especially in the context of a challenge, is getting to a point where you have the chords and you have the core motif. And so once I had these, I was like, okay, now we can start writing. Yeah, I guess maybe this might be a good time to take any questions about things so far, if there are any, or I can just go on with drums. But I actually don't know. You'll have to let me know, by the way. I've like not really used Zoom too much. How do I know if like someone has their hand up or...
You do not have to worry about that. I will handle it. It looks like Chris H might have a question. But oh, hold up. Here we go. I don't know if he... Oh, am I wrong? All right, never mind. So yeah, right now it looks like no one has any questions, so you can just keep
cool
forward.
Yeah, sounds good. Let's So moving on from here, usually I start with the drums actually, but since the sample is so melodic, I decided to go from a chord first perspective. And so still, I remember working on this midsection first. I'll just loop it a little bit and just only play the drums. And I don't really have like a tried and true method for drums, honestly, besides just beatboxing. And it's like kind of embarrassing to do so on your own, but the ability to trial and error different drum patterns over your beat while not doing anything at all, like you just want to be efficient with stuff like this. So like seriously, as bad as it sounds, I mean, no one's gonna hear you. Seriously, learn to kind of like do really terrible beatboxes over your music, because it helps you kind of come up with drum patterns that you might have not thought of before. So yeah, this was sort of the drum setup. Nothing too crazy going on at all. Kick is I'm just gonna shill off the usual packs I use. I use Louis Vuitton packs, who I've been fortunate enough to meet. Robotaki snares are always fantastic. The Count has been putting out ridiculous amount of quality samples. And the rest are just sort of like assorted transition. Cashmere, like I use a ton for transitions and crashes and everything like that. Processing wise, not really that much going on. There's like this weird Carver thing. It's just a transient shaper, which lets you shorten how long a kick is, because sometimes it can be like the tail can stay a bit too long. Yeah, snares are just EQ'd pretty normally, just cutting off all of the low frequencies that you can't really hear anyways. And yeah, you'll notice there's a few other elements here. So the transitions and the kind of vocal effects. Okay. This is literally from Tyler the Creator. And here I think we have some like. Yeah, just some random fills that I like put together. I'm gonna touch on these later because I think it's useful just to kind of go in order of how I actually built it, even though this is in the drum section. So when I was writing, like I didn't have all of that I call like kind of decorative element. I basically just write the drums, and I write I put like a crash and some hi-hats. And so you really just need to get to that groove as fast as you can. Why do I say as fast as you can? Not because you're in a time rush or anything. I had like a full 12 hours to work on this, which is a lot more time than the typical battles. But I think it's actually just important for your own motivation to get to a point where you feel that hook. Basically the part of the song that actually, like, as you're writing, and I'm sure if you've felt it, you know how like addictive it is. If you ever listen to your own stuff and you're like, wow, I really like what I wrote. If you can keep on inducing that, like you will find so much momentum and energy to keep writing. And so that is my philosophy for anything I do, not even just for the sample challenge, but I try to get to that hook. And so once I got there, like I started to hear more and more stuff. So let's see. So I had the motif. And then I usually write the bass lines after this. So yeah, my chains are kind of egregious again, but if you are ever watching my channel or my streams, you'll know that all of my instrumentation is completely in MIDI, kind of out of the frustration that I don't ever want to hire a session musician or learn how to play the instrument myself, maybe down the road. But being having such a strong foundation with the keys, like made me feel like it annoyed me that I couldn't play a bass line on the keys or guitar parts on the keys when I know for a fact, I could hit all of those notes in the recording. So Contact has sort of been my bread and butter for that, and the Scarby Rickenbacker is kind of my like most abused bass sound, and like it just sounds super good regardless of what you do. So here's what it sounds like with the bass. Sorry for the sustain pedal. Yeah, so like it's already got like kind of like this guttural sound. The phaser helps a ton. with getting those like little pops and stuff to come out and adding a little more dirtiness to it. And that sort of stuff is just, you know, little tricks that you pick up over time. Like this was literally something that my friend put on one of his tracks, and I heard it and I was like, this sounds fantastic. I'm just going to use it next time. From there, then it was starting to expand on more melodic ideas. And so here was where the lead came in. I just started going back to the lead and just like improvising over it. So that becomes a lot easier because now you have chords. So it's really weird in a way. You go from like some really, really unfleshed out melody to the chords and then back to another melody section, which now that I think about it is how I write a lot of my sample challenge stuff and maybe even stuff I do on my own. Yeah, and so like as far as I can tell right now, trying to remember this track, it's already like pretty solid. This was literally the core idea, and I remember. I don't recall if I wrote the next section next or if I started building those quote unquote decorative elements. I often think about writing as like this like kind of two-dimensional, right? You have sort of horizontal writing where you're working on the arrangement and developing, you know, the verse and the chorus and the pre-chorus and whatever, or you have vertical writing where you're just focusing on polishing and making a section more interesting. I want to say I added some more stuff here. So this is another use of that sample trick. This is sort of sampled from the Alex Trebek thing. With some delay on it, so just kind of adds like a little, I don't know, like a little Foley. It's really just ear candy. Same with stuff like this is a Wurlitzer from Omnisphere, which is again, this plugin is absolutely insane. It sort of belongs to a whole family of plugins like Trillion and Keyscape, which are unbelievably good. Highly recommend, you know, picking this up, especially for someone who wants to write kind of like hybrid acoustic electronic stuff. It's just it's just such a powerful engine. And yeah, like seriously, not much going on. Just like putting in a little splash of new melodic elements so that it doesn't get boring. And also like, you know, some of the Foley starts coming in. So actually, here's a really good way to not get too invested into some of the drum stuff. One of my least favorite parts of writing is probably drum transitions. So what you should do, or what I do, is I always leave gaps where the drums should be, and you kind of get that suspense right before the next section. Oh, sorry, I didn't mute the original sample here. Like silence will always work as a transition. It's like kind of a lazy transition sometimes, but sometimes it's actually even better transition than putting a drum fill in. So I always leave space kind of for the ears to reset before changing up the sections. And I find that it lets you really get creative with your horizontal writing because your ears have reset, and so you're not as bound to the themes that you put in the previous section. Yeah, so I think it sounds better with the fill, but like it kind of works, and so you just put it in there as a placeholder. The drum fills really came later in the process where I was just kind of digging through stuff and finding some toms to fill it in. So yeah, I guess this is a decent spot to pause and ask for questions again if there are any.
Great. Yeah. So we do have some questions in the chat that I'm happy to read. Just in case anyone else wants to ask any questions that you want to say in person, feel free to hit the raise hand button and we'll spotlight you. But if you want to ask by chat, happy to read them out. So we've got a couple questions on the way you write your chords. So what kind of chords do you usually gravitate to? Like, what is your home base when it comes to writing those?
I always have such a hard time answering those questions. I'm trying to get better at this, but I'm actually not very well versed in music theory, nor did I come from like a jazz piano background. Recently, I have been working with like a jazz like mentor and teacher, and hopefully will continue to do so. to try and like get up my compositional skills. To be honest, these chords all come from the subconscious library of transcriptions that I've done. Whenever I hear chords in songs that I cannot hear, or don't really recognize, I do make it a point to have a day where I have like literally a huge project with a bunch of MIDI in it from me trying to transcribe songs whose chords I've like never heard before, or chord ideas that I basically wouldn't come up with myself, I think is a better metric. And when you start practicing those, it sounds like it won't help, but if you actually practice those songs, not even like in the full song, but just the chord progressions, you end up like getting used to those I want to say like hand positions. There's kind of a subconscious bias towards certain chords and chord shapes. So like one I abuse a lot is like, and so like this is something I'm not trying to use that much. I think another common thing that I didn't realize I was doing, I like having a lot of common tones in my chords. I don't know if necessarily this happens to be a good use of it in this track, but like in the literally the progression I just played, right? We're holding the E flat in there. So this is kind of a neo soul technique, or something that's very common in those sort of chords. So kind of like holding this core theme between them is, I don't know if it's a writing technique. It feels almost just like a habit that I've developed just by the nature of the types of songs that I listen to and the type of chords that I like to transcribe. But that's sort of what I meant when I was talking about it being useful for melodies to come in, because these start to anchor what kind of chords you can have instead of having any option, right? Having, you know, these notes in there are really meaningful in determining what the next note can be. Like you just want to sort of make the canvas smaller sometimes, and from a writing perspective that's very useful. Also, sorry, I'm taking a long time to respond, so I'll try to be faster.
You're actually you answered a couple questions with that one, so that was great.
Oh,
We
okay.
have
Awesome.
another text question, and then I'm gonna give an in-person question. How do you get your
Sure.
drums to sound so big? From Jacob.
It's really just sound selection. Like always, number one is sound selection. And this is kind of an acquired skill, but like having the right ear for what sort of sound you want it feels very abstract to say, but like I knew I wanted a snare with these sort of qualities. So Robotaki's snares helped me a lot. So I think this was like the core snare. I just wanted like this sort of busted, like distorted snare sound, and it comes from listening to, again, really just a lot of critical listening. I don't think the magic actually is really in my processing, because on my like mastered bus for the drums, I really don't have that much. I think I have some like bit crush on it, but it's not even turned on. There's literally nothing really that special going on except for picking sounds that I feel like work well. And as a follow-up, like once you have that foundation, your drums don't need to be loud. Everything else just needs to be quieter. I think that's probably one of the fundamental tenets of mixing. It's all relative because you're going to bump up the volume later on anyways. So like if you're already like kind of vibing to this pattern, you're in a very good spot. I don't need it to be super loud. I know, like, you know, there's just some like little tricks you can do, like, you know, side chain and stuff like that, to help the kicks pump out a little bit more. But really, like, it's so much in just picking the right sound. If you find a snare or a kick that's too muddy for the type of sound you want, you're gonna have a bad time. It's very hard to bring it out from that starting point.
Gotcha. So I'm gonna now, Lydia, if you wouldn't mind launching the raised hand up, that'd be really cool. There we are.
Oh, all right. Hey, what's up, Eric? Yeah, I just
Hey.
wanted to ask, right? So, as you're riding the momentum and you're adding ideas on, when do you know like when to draw the line and say like, okay, you know what, maybe I'm adding a little bit too much, because at times we tend to overthink and go beyond what's needed. So how do you draw that line? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a super, super relevant question. I had a very, very, and I still do, I think. I have a very, very bad habit of adding too much into my tracks. And this was like, when I was first starting, it was literally egregiously like distracting. I would listen to my stuff and I'm like, oh my God, I have like 3 or 4 melodies and I love them all. It's just kind of the producer syndrome. It's hard to sacrifice some of those concepts. And what's even scarier is that you fall into your own sense of, I don't want to say complacency, but you get used to the mix. And so suddenly it doesn't sound that muddy to you, but as soon as you send it to I send it to one of my friends, they're like, dude, I like don't know what's going on in your tracks. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, just listen. And it's like, it's so distracting. You have so many elements pulling your attention away. And I'm like, well, I don't feel that way. And at first, I stubbornly went with it, but then, there's kind of a beauty in focusing on a core idea. And so I sort of learned that through mixing. It's kind of, maybe it's never too bad to have too much stuff because you can always cut it out. I would rather have 5 tracks to choose from than have only one and not be able to think of anything else. So a practical suggestion is just to keep everything, but really you're gonna have to suck it up and make the cut. And right now when I write this, maybe I would have added more stuff. I wish I had an earlier project up, but I promise you, I have had the same exact thing where I've added too much stuff, and only during the mix, you have to be just so strict about what you're keeping. You have to really scrutinize, is this melody really doing anything to help out? Is this second synth chord layer adding that much? Or if I mute it, can I really hear a difference? Sometimes you don't hear a difference, and that's an easy cut. Sometimes you do hear a difference, but it's just it's muddying up so much stuff that you're just okay, it's not worth it. As you go through that exercise of cutting, of just diligently, slicing down your tracks, you will start developing an intuition just from the get-go of how much you need. So I don't think I even wrote too much this time. I didn't have to cut that much. But going through the exercise of deliberately removing stuff from your tracks will help you hone that in.
Thanks.
So we have
Of course.
one more chat question real quick. This is coming from EJ. For keys, pads, and whatever chordal textures, how much do you mess with the stereo imaging?
Almost never. Except for maybe synth pads. But stereo imaging can get out of hand very, very quickly. It'll start sounding really weird, especially if you're doing stuff with delays and getting that Haas effect. You're going to run into some phasing issues. I actually like my stereo images to be quite tight now as I've started moving forward. Before, I think when you start out and you first learn about stereo, it's mind-blowing because you can make things sound super big. But in fact, there's kind of a sweet spot. I think not where it's super wide, but sort of in between, maybe like this. I don't know how to. That's my best visual impression. And it's sort of a weird thing to think about, but stereo imaging is also all just relative. If you have something super wide, it can kind of drain the energy of the rest of the track because this thing is sitting so far in its own space that it can kind of be distracting. So my pads are not meant to be distracting. They're there to kind of just blend and support the track. So if I ever am doing imaging, it's maybe with a very light chorus, or if I have a very, very mono patch, I'll put this thing on it called Wider, which I've used before. It's free. So I think it's by Polyverse, and it does a great job without actually having some of those mono issues. Not that anyone really listens to stuff in mono anymore, but it's nice to keep that principle in mind.
So we have 2 more questions. One of them is in person, so we're gonna launch them forward right now. Any?
Sure.
All right, hey, good evening, Eric. I was wondering, um, if there was, one thing that you wish you knew when you started out producing, like what would it be?
That is a good question. I hope this is like not hyper specific, but the thing that held me back the most personally, especially if you're coming from a like piano background or any sort of melodic instrument, you need to listen to the drums. Because my drums sucked for so long and I couldn't figure out why my song sucked. And it was because whenever I was listening to a song, I'm always listening to like all the harmonies and the chord progressions, and the drums are kind of an afterthought. I'm just like, all right, whatever, you can just like sequence whatever you want. And then my tracks started getting like significantly better when as soon as I started focusing on the drums. Like if the drums sound good on their own, it almost doesn't matter like what you write. Like there's just songs like that are literally just the groove of the beat, and it's kind of a proof of concept of how important they are. So that's like my personal message, and I guess for something more general, is to really just compare yourself to only yourself. It is going to be an endless road of pain if you keep on looking up at your idols and not using them for inspiration, but as like discouragement because you feel like the gap is so big. There's always going to be someone who's going to be better than you. There's literally kids who are like writing crazy songs that I couldn't even get close to right now. But you'll it is so unproductive to think about that. Like the only thing you can do is get better. That's really it.
Man, thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
So this next question, which looks like it's going to be the last for this pause, but this is coming from Jimmy. Do you purposely offset your drums often, and do you do that manually or with the swing feature? And this is also just piggybacking.
Yeah,
on
let
that.
me see.
Thank
you for bringing that up, actually.
Oh, my fault. The hi-hats in this track, could you like kind of break down what they are? You know what I mean?
Yeah. The hi-hats are literally just a loop. I hate sequencing hi-hats because of how hard it is to get that humanization in. I think this is just literally a count loop that I spliced up. I abuse this a lot. Like I always look for hi-hat loops because I don't want to do hi-hat sequencing. That's kind of the philosophy about the hook writing. Not the hook, but getting to that part where you're getting excited about the track. You want to like find shortcuts to override anything you kind of don't like doing. Sometimes I'll recognize, in a song, the hi-hat movement is really important. And it is in a lot of the songs I listen to. I'm just like, I just want to get to the meat of it. I don't really want to worry about it. So sorry, the hi-hats are pretty simple. The other question was about offset, right? So actually, you're right. I totally forgot. I do offset my drums, and that's sort of a manual thing. I don't really like using the swing function, not out of any personal, issues I've had with it. It's just not part of my workflow. I should probably explore it more, but it's also nice just to like move things around yourself, and you don't get like a perfect swing either. Things just come in slightly earlier or late, and you just trial and error until something sounds better. That's really about it.
Gotcha.
Is that all for the questions?
Looks like we have one last one from Chris. Do you have any tips for choosing sounds that work well together? I find myself scrolling through presets too often, and I just,
Yeah, there's kind of a magic trick, actually. And okay, there's two sorts of lines of thoughts. There's one is that in the acoustic world, you have to think about like there have been tried and true combinations, right? Guitar and bass and maybe some strings, and orchestral compositions, right? If you layer the violins and the violas and the cellos and the bass and you put like some horns on it, it's gonna sound good. Like it's just been done. It's proven through time and history that these sounds work together, which is something that I don't think you should ever, feel guilty about using. It seems almost ridiculous to think about that because, they're core sounds. What gets weirder, like obviously it's not going to work for everything, but a good way to get your sounds to mesh more easily is to treat them more as brief rhythmic elements. So the more that a sound dominates the spectrum, the less room or the less options you have in the next sound you need to pick. So what I mean by that is like I don't hold the piano chords. Sometimes songs you want to like just hold this huge pad and like keep it sustained, but like everything here is actually dipping in and out. So like they complement each other, but they don't need to be perfectly complementing each other. The fact that, you know, one element is tucking itself away to let the other element come through has a lot or helps a lot in I guess keeping your palettes open. I'm a terrible sound designer, so that's probably one of my other things that I don't really like doing is like clicking through presets, right? But what can help, and I've realized helped a lot, especially with my recent work, is writing in a way that doesn't dominate your track so quickly with that preset. Like if you do find a preset, don't just like start like banging out like super long chords. Why don't you try just playing like small licks, trying to like just splash in melodic ideas rather than having it completely crush the entire track. Because if you do that, then yeah, of course your next sound's going to kind of have to complement it more strongly. But for me, my philosophy is just keep my options open.
Gotcha. Well, that's all the questions we have right now. So I think keep going, keep plugging along.
Cool. Yeah. Feel free to I don't know, handle me with time. I'm just gonna keep going. I don't need to be anywhere, so I don't really mind if we run over time. But yeah, for the sake of your organization, let me know. So yeah, I guess I'll just like kind of go quicker because I really deep dive like the core section, which was what I felt like was the backbone of the piece, just this like breakdown. And so as I listened to it more and more, it's kind of just like playing off of the stuff you've already written. This started feeling less of like a chorus and more of like a pre-chorus. Like the movement of the melody just going up felt like we were setting up for something. And so I wanted kind of, all I really knew moving into the next session was I wanted some sort of like decompression or like energy flowy, I don't know, feel. The vocabulary could probably be better, but hopefully you kind of hear it. So I'll just play it through from like here. And yeah, this sort of came again off of just a chord section. So, you know, I think this is, now that I'm thinking about it, this is actually really helpful because I didn't even realize this about my own writing. I do use words and visuals to help guide what I want to write. And when I like the only word I can really think of is like free flowing in the section. I wanted to feel like you're just like kind of gliding. So to get that feel, I think that's a lot more sustained. And in sections like this, I think I started off with the guitar here again, just sort of working off the chords. And so you have like this really dreamy retro guitar sound. And once again, like, you know, it's fake, it's MIDI, but you know they've done a wonderful job with the sample libraries, and the bass line. I also kind of had heard examples of like this flow I was trying to go for, and so this is more of like an EDM-y kind of thing actually. I have like a Moog and a sub up here. And so, like, this is just a blatant contrast from, say, the bass line here, right? Where it's just a lot more staccato and pushed out. And so it's kind of, you know, black magic. But you start to figure out, like, quantitatively, what does flowy mean? Like, what do these words and visuals mean? And how do I actually translate into my writing? And so for me, it was just like, oh, I just want kind of like reverb. I want more sustain. I want things to hold out for longer and kind of be like this blast of sound that keeps on scoring through. And that was really like the core. Once I had that again, it was like kind of the same thing where you just start to play off of the things you've written. Sorry, I don't think the drums change that much here. Yeah, the drum pattern changed a little bit just to give some room for the top lines here. But like once again, like strings, right? Another thing about flowy and soaring, I was just like, oh, just have like a string line. And like, yeah, I don't know how many times I'm gonna repeat it, but seriously, sustain was like on top of mind. And once I had that in place, it was just like screwing around with some leads here. This one I think was a Omnisphere. This is a keyscape thing. They had like an Ottawa Rhodes thing, which I felt like worked really well. I think I literally just accidentally cleared it. That's my bad. All right, well, it still sounds okay. That was my bad. But yeah, this is kind of actually maybe a quick thing. I'm just looking at my chains because I'm like having flashbacks to what I did. I don't even remember doing some of this stuff. Leads, I'll care a little bit more about the stereo field than the pads. Generally, as the frequencies get higher, my restrictions for stereo width become a lot more lenient. It's just kind of like those general mixing guides where it's like an inverse pyramid where as the frequencies get higher, you can go wider, and as they're lower, you keep it in mono because you can't really hear lower frequencies in stereo too well, though some people pull it off brilliantly, like Sam Gellatry. So there's no rules. There's no rules. It's just the general habits I've fallen into. And once again, the second lead was made from the sample. And yeah, I'm really trying to think about like how I crafted these. This was just a ton of comping. I remember writing a lot of versions of solos and basically just picking out little phrases from it that I liked, and then finally doing a final take of it. It is really just like brute forcing it for something like this where you need to have such a dominant lead element. Yeah. There's not that much method to the madness. I remember this probably took me a really long time. This was like, maybe like 30% of the overall writing process was coming up with this solo line because I just felt like certain parts sustained for too long or didn't have enough movement. And one thing that I did want to do, just to keep a level of cohesiveness with your tracks, it's nice to really identify things you set up for you before. Like I just use the word motif a lot, and so like this little thing plays out this thing plays throughout like all the sections. But then when I play this lead, like it's nice to have callbacks to it. And it just, I don't know, gives your sense of writing a little bit more maturity and like, it doesn't feel like you're just mathematically plugging notes in, which is like something I really, really try to avoid. Obviously, you can find a scale and just click, random things in the MIDI pool until it works. But, having some deliberateness to it is seriously, I don't know. I feel like it just helps your songs come together in a way where it has nothing to do with the mix or the sounds you use. It's like purely like ideological like glue, which is a weird thing to say, but hopefully you get what I mean. And from there on, like, I'm just gonna quickly go over mixing. I don't think there's really that much. I feel like I talk about it a lot. Literally all I do is mute the drums, like EQ the drums as needed, gain stage, and then I click on elements, I click on the chords, and then I click on the lead, and have just those playing. And then I just gain stage. Like, that is seriously going to make things so much easier. There's not that much happening, even though my chains seem really long, and like these are some EQs like have these cuts here and there. I think if you took them off, it really wouldn't make that much of a difference. There really is so much you can do just from gain staging and sound selection. That is probably 75 to 80% of mixing, in my opinion. And you'll start to figure out like when you need to be more surgical and when to use these. I think these concepts are probably better taught in like online, because I just kind of fumble around with it. I don't think I really understood how to use compression until recently, and even then I'm like barely like I can find, you know, very specific cases to use it. Sorry. And I think that's pretty much it. Mixing is just like a really quick pass. If I have to shout out a track spacer, by the way. This thing is really, really useful. If you do have like elements that are fighting, this is kind of a addendum to the question about how do I not add so much stuff. Sometimes you do want to add, you do kind of listen to something and you're like, you know, from an idea standpoint, they should work together, but like something in the frequencies is causing it to clash. So I use this thing as a very lazy fix. You can basically put in sounds through it, and it will duck the frequencies that are conflicting like dynamically, and just a really nice way to make room efficiently and subtly. I think that's really it. I know I'm over time, but I'm happy to take more questions if there are any.
Wow, that was so informative and a lot of fun. I learned so much from that personally, and I'm reading in the chat that a lot of other people did too. If anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask just right now and just fire them out, go ahead and hit the raise hand button, and we'll launch you in front.
Let me see if I can. Why can't I open my chat? Oh, I can see it. Oh, thank you so much, everyone in
I
chat.
think everyone's really just so speechless.
No, it's all good. Panning versus wider.
We have one quick question from Joshua Kwan. Can you show us the structure of the chords real quick?
Yes. Oh, I don't want to leave meeting. Sorry. Also, Jason, I'm just scrolling through chat. This guy's from my chat. I think I'll remember to get to you. Hold on. The structure of the chords. Sorry. Do you mean like just the MIDI? If so, this is like it. You'll notice that it's super rough. Because I play it in live, and I'll do like some minimal quantization to like bring like, you'll notice the first note is pretty much always quantized, but what I don't do is I don't really quantize the other notes coming in, because you kind of want that like staggered when you're playing almost anything. Like I never, unless it's like a synth or electronic thing, I never use like those block chords. So this is sort of just a function of my workflow, or maybe an artifact of it, because I record everything live. And then kind of just adjust it afterwards. It's like really, really crucial for how I like work.
Gotcha. Well, listen, if there's not any other questions, I again just want to thank you so much. This is kind of the first time that we've gone with this kind of masterclass thing, and I think we're going to be seeing a lot more, judging by, you know, how much fun it was, the reaction we're getting. I'm also going to put the link to our YouTube channel where this is going to be posted. I'm in the chat right now if anyone wants to check it out. But otherwise, thank you so much again, Eric, and I hope everyone has, you know, a good night, a good midterm season, and, you know, keep producing.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for hosting this. Always happy to help. I guess like if you want more of this, I do try to stream weekly, so it always feels like hopefully it doesn't feel like this is some like a super inaccessible thing. Feel free to reach out anytime.
Great. And also everyone, make sure to check out his music on Spotify. New single dropping tomorrow. You know the vibes.
Absolutely. Thank you again. Have a good night, guys.